Hello, today I'd like to talk about planting out fruit trees, and we're actually planting these down in our own garden today. I'm going to plant out a bare root tree, and I'm also going to plant out a potted fruit tree. Um, Possibly the most important thing at this point is to explain the differences between the two. So I'll start with the potted tree. This is actually a Morello cherry, and these are the sort of trees that we sell from the late spring right through the summer months into the early autumn, i.e. when we can't live from the open ground. And obviously being potted at that time of year, they can go straight in. So middle of June, July, obviously it'll have leaves on then, but you can still plant them into your garden because the roots and everything are going to be virtually undisturbed when you plant it. If you don't get round to planting it immediately, then obviously being in a container, that's fine too. You can just keep it watered and grow it in a container, or in fact grow it on into a larger container if you want and keep it in a container forever. So that's a potted fruit tree, and obviously through the winter months we live from the open ground, and that's what you call a bare root tree. Now this is as you'd receive them from us, so the roots are packed in composted chipped bark so that keeps them moist before you actually get round to planting them. So if you're receiving a fruit tree for Christmas, or when you receive your fruit trees as snow and ice on the ground and you can't get a spade in the ground, provided you keep this moist and make sure it's in contact with the roots, the tree will be fine for a good 2-3 weeks, even a little bit more. Just make sure it's kept moist and make sure the roots are nicely wrapped. If you're going to keep it outside, put some straw or something over it so the roots themselves don't freeze. But the top of the tree will be fine. They've been outside all winter, so they'll be fine anyway. And yeah, so if I take the bag off, you'll see that obviously the roots themselves are bare, hence the expression bare root fruit tree. So that really is the difference between the two. And other than that, there's not an awful lot in the way that we plant them. I'm going to plant them both separately, obviously, because there's a little bit of a technique with regard to staking them. But what I'll say is we're actually developing a little orchard down here at home. We're planting the trees about 10 feet apart, which is just over 3 meters, and then we're doing a second row that's going to follow in, and that's what we're doing today, is starting on that second row. And that's going to be 10 feet off, but we're going to plant in the centre of the row before, so we're interspacing. And then this ground that looks quite tatty at the moment, in the spring we'll give it a quick tickle over the rotavator, and we're going to do this as wildflowers. So that's why it's a little bit tatty now, but that's fine at this end of the year. So I start by planting the bare root tree, or should I say I'm going to start by digging the hole for the bare root tree. And also for the potted tree, the rule of thumb is exactly the same, that I'm going to need to dig a hole that is going to be double the width of the root ball and also double the depth. So if I get my potted tree as well, you'll see I'm basically going to have to dig the same size hole for both trees. The reason we make the holes oversized is so that we can incorporate some better compost and fork over the outside of the hole as well, to really give the tree the best start in life. So we're digging a hole bigger and then we're going to fill it back in. Now I'm going to pop this back in here because obviously it is important to keep the roots of your bare root tree moist. You don't want those drying out, and even though we are in November and it's quite a cheerful day today, those roots will dry out, especially in a little bit of wind in the air or what have you, and we don't need that either. So I'll pop that back in my wheelbarrow. I've got my trusty spade, and I know I need to be here because I can see my row from the front, from the previous row, and all I'm going to do is start taking out that hole. Now obviously you don't want to stand here and watch me dig the holes, so I'll catch up with you when I've dug out the holes. So here we are, holes are dug. As you can see, I've actually put a string line through so that I could find the middle of the holes, and so that the row of trees that we're putting in will line up with the others. Otherwise we'll end up with a wonky row and it will drive me nuts forever. So as I say, hole is dug. If you want to have a look in, you'll see the most important thing to do now is actually with a fork prick over the bottom, and then I'm just going to gently prick round the sides a little bit. We're blessed with a wonderful clay flint soil, which is verging on horribly useless, but it does grow out very, very well. It's just a job of getting a spade or a fork or anything into the ground. So as I say, that's broken up and the bottom's broken up. And now what I'm going to do is pop in some well-rotted manure. Now this is well-rotted. This is 4-year-old horse manure. I wouldn't use anything fresher than about a year, 18 months old, 18 months preferably. And you don't want to go too mad with how much you put in. You could use something like old grow bag, compost, leaf mould, anything like that really, just to improve the soil. And really it's a sort of halfway house situation between the tree having been grown in a container, so in the perfect growing medium if you like, and the tree growing into the ground. So if you like, it's a bit like dipping your toes into the bath before you hop in, just in case it's too hot and to acclimatise. So now I'll pop this out of the pot, and I need to see the height, and as you can see I want to be planting about there. I put that down to ground level, it wants to be about there, so I need to pop a little bit more soil in. I'm just going to say a couple more words actually about pot boundness. As I said, unless a plant has been in a pot for many years, you'll actually find that they won't be pot bound, and a gentle tease with your hands on the roots will sort everything out. People make a big thing about pot bound, and even now in some garden centres you see people taking things out of the pots to check that they actually aren't pot bound. Now the thing with that is there are now chemicals on the commercial market that you treat your pots with, and it will actually stop the roots circling round and round. So in other words, you can make something that theoretically should look pot bound not look pot bound forever. So I would worry a little bit about pot boundness, but not as much as everyone goes on. As you saw, I just hopped in the hole there and firmed it, because obviously all that ground below, there we go, really is soft because we've gone down quite a way. And that, when I drop that down to level, still needs to come up a little bit. You don't want to plant too much further than the original compost mark from the pot, or when we get onto the bare root one, where it's been grown in the field. A little bit below is fine. You've got to bear in mind that this has been potted, it's been weeded a couple of times, so the soil mark wants to be somewhere ultimately here. Never ever as deep as a graft, and never this sort of depth. So that's going to end up roughly where I want, I think. Might just give it another help with some soil. If Tufty doesn't fill the hole in for me. There we go, that would be about right. Now, the other thing about potted trees is getting the stake in. Obviously with a bare root tree you can see where all the roots are. With a potted tree you can't. So I personally prefer to put my stake in, or part put my stake in before I put it in the ground. And then if you do come across anything big and root-like, one of the bigger roots, then you're not going to do any damage because you can just move the stake round. So hopefully one push with this and it will go straight through, which it did. And that means that stake will be fine, and it means I haven't affected any of the decent root there. What I might actually do now, before Tufty fills my hole completely in, is just tuck that stake in. Lovely. Now we just need to backfill the hole, and once again I'm going to do exactly the same. I'm going to get some compost in there quickly, some soil in there quickly, helping the garden. I'm going to tread that round. And one thing you probably have noticed as well is I haven't used any dry fertiliser, so there's no bone meal or any of the stimulants like that. The reason being is I personally prefer to use anything like that for a top dress rather than getting close to the root itself. To put it on at any strength reasonable. Tufty, please don't empty the whole back out. Come on out of the way, monster. Come on. To get it on at any strength that's reasonable, you actually risk burning any of the roots, any of the young root. So, and the reality is, this end of the year, tree's not going to take anything up. And if it was a fresh, come on Tuft, out of the way, darling. If it was a fresh summer planting, it's not going to be in a hurry to take anything out either. So that nice compost that we put in, that will be fine, and won't do the harm. And you can see I'm firming that quite well, like that. Just move the barrow out of the way, take it down to the other hole.